Allen Ginsberg, you are America's best-known poet. You were a key figure of the Beat generation with Kerouac and Burroughs. Now the beard and the hair are trim. You wear a suit and a collar and a tie. Just brought out a new volume, Cosmopolitan Greetings. But is the real Allen Ginsberg still in there?
Though I'm a Buddhist, and I think the Buddhists would say there is no real permanent self in any case, but there are many appearances of self. So I'm certainly a beat poet, and I'm certainly Jewish, and I'm certainly gay, and I'm certainly an American, and I'm certainly a practicing meditator, and I suppose a part of the counterculture in America, which is now under attack by the neoconservative theopolitical televangelists who are denouncing the McGovernick counterculture and threatening war on it. So I don't know if there is a real Allen Ginsberg any more than there might be a real Jeremy Isaacs.
You're a member, you say, of the counterculture. In the bohemia of New York in the mid-50s, you lived, you almost grew up in an atmosphere of drink and drugs and gay sex and some violence.
Was not that much violence. After all, we were more anti-war, and I've not been so much involved with violence as in pacifist activity. But certainly drink, some friends drank. I never did. Drugs, I've tried almost everything, but I'm more of a workaholic, so I never was addicted to anything except the killer drug, nicotine, which I quit many years ago because I have high blood pressure, among other reasons. But I've had friends who've been in trouble.
And friends who, there were deaths among your friends, and yes, violent deaths among your friends.
Some, but you know, I think we have an actuarial average above normal. After all, William Burroughs is 80 years old and very productive. Herbert Huncke, who was, let me say, the original Beat personage, is approaching 80, or is 80 already, and still writing, and has just been in England, I believe. And Gary Snyder is thriving as a 60-year-old, myself. And Philip Whalen is now the abbot of the Hartford Street Zen Center in San Francisco. So, and Peter Orlovsky is...
And you're sitting in front of me.
And Gregory Corso's around, writing as beautifully as ever.
But what was the attraction of that very outré bohemian lifestyle?
Well, you know, Bohemia is a very old lifestyle. You had it in Bloomsbury. You had it in, with mixed sex, of course, in Bloomsbury, which was one of the attractions. That it was possible to be gay without having to be ashamed of it in that generation, in that community. Burroughs was gay, I was gay, Kerouac was straight, Neil Cassidy, a friend, was straight but willing to sleep with me. So there was a sort of a tolerance, what Keats would call negative capability, the ability to hold opposing ideas in the mind without an irritable reaching after fact and reason. The key there is irritable. It's sort of a sense of tolerance.
It wasn't long before in your poems, in Howl, for example, you were able and willing to make explicit statements about your sexuality.
Yes.
Wasn't that very difficult in what was, after all, McCarthy's America?
Well, it would have been if I had intended it to be public, but to tell you the truth, and as I've said before, Howl was written sort of in despair at writing poetry. I figured I hadn't succeeded in writing anything interesting. And so I said, well, then I'll just writing for myself, and I'll forget about any idea of publishing poetry. And so I started writing, I Saw the Best Minds of My Generation Destroyed by Madness, and I went on to catalog a series of almost grotesque, ironic, mocking, serious, sincere, trompe-l'oeil, psychologically or mythological gossip that I'd heard of. And when it got to my own, got fucked in the ass by handsome sailors and screamed with joy, rather than screamed with pain or agony, I realized how funny it was, but I knew that my father would not want to read that. So from then on I knew I wouldn't be able to publish the poem. And so I was completely free to write anything I wanted. And if you don't show anybody, you can do anything you want. That's the funny part. Which is why the poem is good, because it was written for my own privacy. Later on, people saw the manuscript and liked it, and then I gave a reading in which I thought would be like a small, private, arty reading in a small art gallery. with other poets, Kerouac and Gary Snyder, among others. And everybody liked the poem, so I said, well, I guess it's all right then. But then I still was hesitant to publish it because of I didn't want my father to read the gay, explicit imagery. But finally I sent it to him. And he wrote me back a very interesting letter, he, Louis Ginsberg, being a poet, saying, this is a great poem full of energy and exuberance, but do you need all those blue words? So I explained to him, well, the way it passed through my head, and he got used to it.
When it was published, it was prosecuted for obscenity.
Yes, I was not there in San Francisco when the customs seized it, and then when the juvenile vice squad intruded on city lights and arrested the poet Ferlinghetti for publishing it. I was already in Tangier with Jack Kerouac and Peter Orlovsky and William Burroughs, helping type and assemble the manuscript of Naked Lunch. And I thought that was much more important than going back to fight a temporary little local trial, because if I won, well, I won. If I lost, I won anyway. And the poem would be sought after by generations if it were forbidden. So I couldn't lose either way. And Ferlinghetti said it was not necessary to come back.
And in fact, a rather good judgment by the judge found for you.
Yeah, legally very interesting judgment. I don't know if they have that in England. You know, the Bloomsbury group, Roger Fry and Virginia Woolf, came out in defense of The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall, but they were not allowed to admit expert testimony as to its literary value. It was just whether it was obscene or not, and expert testimony was forbidden. In the Howell decision, Judge Horne said that questions of literary merit or beauty and questions of social critique are protected by the Constitution, and that established a precedent legally.
In writing Howell, you also found a form. You found what you described as open form rather than closed form to write verse in. Could you say something about that? What's the difference?
Well, it was a shift to cadences used idiomatically in ordinary speech. Some of that is in Zen, they speak of ordinary mind as the highest mind. So in a sense, highest mind. So in a sense, ordinary speech is the highest speech, in that there are phrases in idiomatic speech, vernacular speech, that penetrate in every direction aesthetically or intellectually, but are also commonly understood. Like the phrase, catch yourself thinking. Everybody knows what that means. And yet in esoteric Buddhism, it's the process of stopping your mind and observing the mind. In everyday barroom talk or pub talk, it might be, well, the other day I caught myself thinking of my mother-in-law. So it's a very good way of talking. It's something that Wordsworth proposed, a renovation of English diction 150 longer years ago, and that William Carlos Williams proposed in America, to break up the stanza and measure the spoken breath by breath stop, or measure the idea, or measure the length of the breath, or the or there would be equivalent to measure the length of the breath, or so you could have a relative measure, as William Carlos Williams, my mentor, called it.
Was Howell an angry poem about America?
I wouldn't say angry. There are certain aspects wrathful in judgment, but I'd say more exuberant, because, you know, the ultimate part is the peroration at the end. I'm with you in Rockland, where you're madder than I am, but I'm with you. It's a gesture of sympathy to a friend who is in trouble, basically, with a certain amount of anguish in it. The ultimate accusation really is Moloch, whose name is the mind. It isn't, you know, out there, the all-devouring God that the destroyer God is not out there. It's our own imagination, as Blake pointed out. So Moloch, whose name is the mind, is hardly angry. That's a piece of wisdom teaching, actually, or something that I understood from Blake long ago.
Had you seen the best minds of your generation destroyed?
It's hyperbole.
You just rattled off half a dozen of them who are still with us.
Yes, but, well, it's hyperbole. There's a certain exaggeration there. I mean, the first verse originally went, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, mystical, naked. And I thought that was too sentimental, so I said starving, hysterical, naked. I did revise it that much to get some sense of distance and irony from it.
You speak of the need for candor in writing and making the private world public. That's what the poet does. Is that right? Is that what you do?
Yes, very consciously following the direction of my ultimate American mentor, Walt Whitman, who in 1855, early edition of Leaves of Grass, said that he hoped that American poets would develop in the direction of candor, kind of inadvertent, manipulative frankness, like spontaneous frankness.
To what degree was Whitman able, as you were, to be candid about his homosexuality?
Well, you know, it's amazing if you read the Calamus sections of Leaves of Grass, or even his Old Age Echoes, where he has to talk about his constipation. He was quite candid about his emotions. He wasn't candid about his physical loves, if he had any, although I slept with Neil Cassidy, who slept with the Gavin Arthur, the grandson of President Chester Arthur, who had slept with Edward Carpenter, who said that Edward Carpenter told him he had slept with Walt Whitman. So there's some kind of lineage of gossip there. But I don't think Whitman was able to proclaim the physical love in his poems, but he certainly proclaimed the emotional attachment in the Calamus sections.